The StoneZONE with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and you're in the right place for politics. It's the StoneZONE. First, let me bring in my co-host for the day, Illinois Review Editor-in-Chief and Publisher, Mark Vargas.
Roger, it's great to be with you. It's always an honor, and it's a great time to be an American right now.
Yes, indeed. Before we get into the topics of the day, 2 of them. One is the fight over Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to be Director of National Intelligence. I want to first do a quick commercial announcement. Are the globalists gearing up for another pandemic scare after failing at the ballot box in November? Just weeks before Trump's inauguration, California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a bird flu state of emergency, granting himself once again sweeping powers reminiscent of the COVID-19 policies. This comes after a severe case of H5N1 bird flu was reported in Louisiana. Critics like Nicholas Hulser warn that pandemic fears may be weaponized to challenge Trump's agenda, including the nomination of Robert Kennedy to lead HHS. Is this a health crisis or is it a political power play? Last summer, Dr. Peter McCullough warned about the bird flu. He said, linking the virus's rapid spread to gain-of-function research once again, which is still in common practice in many labs globally. Dr. McCullough urges early prevention just in case. Therefore, we're recommending the Contagion Emergency Kit from the Wellness Company. His medical board approved solution has 5 critical life-saving medications such as ivermectin, Tamiflu. It has a nebulizer and hydroxychloroquine. Every household can now have access to these hard-to-get medications in the event that we have yet another pandemic. You can get yours by filling out a digital intake form, and your kit will then arrive in 1 to 2 weeks. Don't wait until the deep state puts their plan into action. Stay ready for the unexpected. Now, the way you do that is by going to twc.health/rstone and use promo code rstone to save $30 plus free shipping. So get prepped with ivermectin and other life-saving medications all through the Wellness Company. This offer is good in the United States only. Mark, as you saw yesterday, Robert F. Kennedy, I think in a tour de force performance in his Senate confirmation hearings. What did you think of those proceedings?
Well, I think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. displayed just sort of the brilliance of President Trump and that he has selected the right people to serve in his cabinet. And not just in Robert Kennedy's hearing, but in Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel's hearings as well. And I know we'll talk about this, just showed so much strength and resolve. And it really had the mental illness of the Democratic Party, Democratic senators on full display, who were literally melting and unraveling before our very own eyes. And what's remarkable, Roger, is that all the Democrats wanted to focus on vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. But yet what they didn't want to focus on was that the fact that Americans are getting sicker. Americans live with more illness than any other person in the country around the world. And American children are dying at rates far higher than children in other wealthy, developed countries. They want to spend all their time talking about vaccines and the COVID shot when Americans, and particularly children, are dying at record numbers. And this Make America Healthy, again, is more about making is more than making Americans healthier. It's about saving lives.
To them, it seems to me it's about making big pharma companies even richer. It was always going to be uphill because, let's face it, the big pharma lobby is perhaps the most powerful in Washington. They have a deep record of giving huge campaign contributions to many of these senators. It was interesting watching Elizabeth Warren, also known as a Pocahontas, meaning fake Indian, questioning Robert Kennedy when she's taken more, I think $5.2 million in campaign contributions from either drug companies or others in the healthcare industry. She's a biased player in this entire act. It is really nauseating. And I have to say this right out to you, Mark, because I believe it. Ron Wyden could be one of the most objectionable, despicable people I've seen in a 50-year record in American politics.
Roger, and you know and I have to agree with you, but you know what's interesting is I think what's great about this is exposing, to your point, this is exposing to the American people who may not have paid attention in years past of how these large corporations and Wall Street control their elected representatives. And I think it's a shocking revelation to many Americans. And I think Robert Kennedy's hearing exposed that, the millions and millions of dollars that Elizabeth Warren has taken from the big pharma. When Bobby Kennedy called out Bernie Sanders yesterday and said in 2020 you accepted $1.3 million in campaign donations from big pharma, he denied it and then was painted into a corner, then said, well, that was my presidential campaign, and then followed up and said, well, there's so many donors I can't keep track of who's donating to my campaign. But Roger, don't you think this is really exposing who controls these elected representatives?
Yeah, it really is extraordinary. Plus, of course, they all stick to this false narrative. Not, in other words, accepted science or proven science. What makes you more capable of knowing more than the scientists or the doctors? Well, in many, many cases, the scientists and the doctors have lied to us. And then more importantly, they've held information back from us that the American people need to know about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccinations that they want us to put into our body. This is always going to be an uphill fight given the power of big pharma. But if there's one appointee who makes them more apoplectic, it would be Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to serve as President Trump's Director of National Intelligence hinges largely on questions about the judgment and patriotism of this former Congresswoman and Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. All of these doubts, of course, are being touted heavily in the mainstream media. There's a Washington Post, probably I could say New York Times story actually, which is in 50 years in American politics, I've never quite seen anything like this. It's devoid of facts and names. So they tell us that Tulsi Gabbard was placed on a secret TSA domestic terrorist watch list under the Quiet Skies program because she attended a meeting at the Vatican. And they tell us there was someone at the meeting, but they can't tell us his name, that they object to, and that this somebody who a name that Tulsi has said under questioning she doesn't recognize, that this individual was somehow on an FBI watch list, which they felt gave them license to spy on a four-term former Congresswoman. This article is really incredible. Former Congressman Mick Mulvaney steps forward to say, no, no businessman invited her. I invited her because we served in the House together. They stress in the article that there's nothing wrong with the meeting, but that she was flagged because there was allegedly one person who they won't name, and they won't tell us what he allegedly did or why he was on the domestic terrorist list. This is the shoddiest piece of journalism I have ever seen. It's devoid of fact. It's full of anonymous sources non-attributed quotes. It's amazing how these echoes almost completely are carbon copies of issues that have been raised against Tulsi Gabbard in the past by Hillary Clinton, by Senator Tammy Duckworth, and of course, Pocahontas herself, Elizabeth Warren. They continue to spread this falsehood that Tulsi Gabbard is compromised, that she's a Russian asset, that she's in Putin's pocket. This is an insult to someone. They basically said she was good enough to go to war in Iraq and Kuwait, where she served as a combat veteran, but she's not good enough for this job. This, of course, all was begun once again by John Brennan, the former CIA director. Now, John Brennan's a really interesting guy. First of all, he admits to having voted for the Communist Party candidate for president. He signed 4 of the visas for the Saudis who came here and attacked America on 9/11. So there have been questioned about that. He, as you know, went to the Five Eyes nations, those being the English-speaking nations of the world, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and so on, and asked them to open up surveillance on 26 individuals who happen all to be friends or associates of Donald Trump. I was one of those people. I assume that they were looking for Russian contacts and Russian collusion. They came up, as we know from John Durham's report, completely and totally empty-handed. So this is done in this way so that Brennan would have deniability. You know, oh no, we didn't spy on Roger Stone or George Papadopoulos. That was the Australians, or that were the Canadians, or that was the Brits. It's plausible deniability, and it's really shoddy. It's interesting that Brennan, who I think is the mastermind of all of this, meaning I think he's the mastermind of the Russian collusion hoax for sure. I think he's also the mastermind of the Ukrainian impeachment, which, as we now know, was really not about Donald Trump and what he did at all. It was really done to cover the tracks of Joe Biden and what he did, namely pressuring the Ukrainians to fire a prosecutor who was in the midst of investigating Hunter Biden and the business he was doing with the Ukrainian energy company. It's amazing. Now, President Mike McCall, the Republican chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, has called on Trump's agents, Trump's selection of Gabbard, to oversee 18 different spy agents. He said it was baffling, and he went so far as to predict her defeat in the Senate. Eyebrows have also been raised over Gabbard's support of a pardon for Edward Snowden. Now, Edward Snowden was the contractor who stole and released classified information revealing that the United States government was conducting domestic mass surveillance, and eventually Snowden received and got asylum in Russia. As you know, the most important takeaway here is that General James Clapper specifically denied under oath that there was any metadata collection program on Americans at all. That is, of course, a lie. And that was proven when Edward Snowden released documents that proved definitively that Clapper was lying. Where is Clapper today? He's teaching ethics at Vermont College, and he gets a hefty paycheck from CNN. So in the past, Tulsi Gabbard has said that she believes that Snowden should be pardoned. That goes against the fake narrative that is promulgated by the fake news media, but certainly not about her views on Edward Snowden. I personally think he should be pardoned. I actually think he's a hero. The reason he upsets the deep state so much is because he's revealed their dirty secrets, and he's shown the American people that they're being spied on. To me, this is outrageous. The other big issue here has to do with a visit that Tulsi Gabbard made to visit Bashar al-Assad, who was engaged at that point in a long and brutal war against U.S.-backed insurgents. There's a great piece by Aaron Matei of Inside Politics who points out that Nancy Pelosi flew there and met with Tulsi Gabbard, but no one questioned her ability to be Speaker of the House, and that secondarily, that Gabbard expressed at the time and now her concern that the last time that this coalition of Islamics ran the country, there were mass slaughter of Christians, including the crucifixion of children as young as 5 years old. Back in 2017, as the United States was winding down their covert war to occupy or their covert war to overturn Bashar's government and to have the terrorist groups occupying swaths of the country leave, Gabbard warned Assad's removal would create a destabilizing power vacuum filled, at the time, she said, by al-Qaeda. Gabbard voiced skepticism of these allegations, particularly in two incidents that had prompted U.S. military airstrikes. The charges against Gabbard, which have been recently, as I say, revived in this ridiculous Washington Post story that names it's a masterpiece of innuendo, but it's devoid of any provable facts. You really have to check it out. All of these charges against Gabbard are nonsense. What they fear is she is, of course, brilliant, and she has a deep skepticism of the people that she would be in charge of overseeing. The 18 intelligence agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, Naval Intelligence, and so on. It is absurd to say that she is not fit to be the director of intelligence simply because she visited Syria to see firsthand what was happening there. And yes, she did meet with Assad, but then so did Nancy Pelosi. No one questioned whether she should be removed as Speaker of the House. Gabbard's record on Syria and that of our intelligence agencies that she's poised to leave show that her views are not fringe positions, as her detractors now claim. Gabbard has never offered support for Assad. She's never denied, and Assad has never denied his use of chemical weapons used by his recently ousted government. In a 2020 statement during her run for the Democrat nomination there, Mark, she described Assad as an evil dictator, and said that there's evidence that the anti-government insurgents, financed and directed by our own CIA, were the ones who were using chemical weapons. Gabbard also has voiced skepticism about specific chemical weapons allegations that were lodged against the Assad government. Again, she's far from alone. U.S. officials, including the top of the intelligence leadership agencies, agreed with her. So on this contentious issue, the available evidence shows that Tulsi Gabbard's skepticism does not contradict that of the U.S. intelligence community, which has never released their formal assessments. They're only described in the media. There is no violation of the law. There's no reason why a member of Congress on a fact-finding mission can't visit a foreign country. So when Gabbard met Assange in Damascus, I think that was January 2017, she characterized the encounter as an effort to end one of the century's deadliest war. In order to end any war, you have to have talks. If Richard Nixon taught us anything, he taught us that. And having a conversation with people who are your adversaries or whose record on corruption or human rights are not ours necessarily, certainly does not constitute treason of any kind. Mark, what's your thinking?
Well, Roger, this is why you're Roger Stone, because the way you've broken this down over the last several minutes, I think is brilliant and really defines what these core issues are. But what I think needs to happen, and I know you agree with this as well, and so does every common sense thinking American, is that our intelligence agencies literally need to be burned down to the ground and rebuilt. I can't help when talking about spying, not only did the intelligence agencies use to spy on Donald Trump and his campaign, but we think about the FISA court and listening and taping recorded conversations. Going back to our friend, former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, his judge in the case sat on the FISA court, which is why they got a FISA warrant to tap into his phones and listen to thousands and thousands of hours of conversations. But the justification to tap into his phone was not a legal justification. The justification was the governor's going to engage in aggressive fundraising. Well, last time I checked, that's not a violation of the law, and that shouldn't be the way the FISA court should be utilized, the powers of the FISA court to start spying on Americans and, more importantly, sitting governors. And so all of these intelligence agencies need to be stripped down and rebuilt. And that is why the establishment, the corrupt cabal in Washington is so opposed to these nominations like Gabbard and Kash Patel, because what we've learned, Roger, is that the report coming out recently saying that Anthony Fauci was manipulating intelligence reports so that when they'd go to the president or when they're documented in official intelligence reports, hiding the fact that, yes, the U.S. government was funding the Wuhan lab. And so they were deliberately leaving that information off of official documentations, and yet another example of an intelligence cover-up. So not only have they used their powers to spy on Americans, illegally spy on Americans, legally spy on a president and presidential candidate like Donald Trump, they're using their powers. They're cooperating with the mainstream media. I mean, look what they did to you, Roger. I mean, the cooperation between the DOJ and CNN is remarkable. And that was on full display when they were there to witness and record in real time the raid of nearly 30 SWAT team members with automatic rifles and amphibious vehicles behind your house and underwater divers in case you were going to do a James Bond type exit from your home. They're cooperating with the mainstream media. And so my last point on this is we're seeing mainstream media die. Legacy media is dying. Ratings of CNN and MSNBC are plummeting. They're having to fire their top talent. At the same time, Roger, we're beginning to see the depletion and the fall of the Washington regime. And so I can't think of a better, more qualified candidate than Tulsi Gabbard to lead our intelligence services, because she was smart and she was a hero when she was a Democrat. But now that she's a Republican and a nominee for a very important position in Donald Trump's administration, they seem to have forgotten all of that in they've got amnesia. They seem to have forgotten that in just a short period of time.
So, to Gabbard's critics, particularly Democrats, this meeting with Assad that they harp on was actually, they claim, served to legitimize the dictator. Again, the Washington Post. Now, the Post's recent article casts her trip to Syria as a red flag regarding her nomination. It doesn't mention, however, the Office of Congressional Ethics investigated her visit and they found no violations of law. The Post also fails to note that such efforts by members of Congress are not unprecedented. As I said earlier, beginning in 2007, for example, former House Speaker, still a Congresswoman, Nancy Pelosi visited with Assad. A former Secretary of State, John Kerry, met separately with Assad in Damascus, with Kerry actually doing it multiple times, despite complaints by the Bush administrations that such meetings would legitimize the dictator. You're not allowed to have your own foreign policy under the Logan Act, but I don't recall any Washington Post editorials questioning what John Kerry was doing. This country continues to surround Gabbard's nomination, and it will be used to try to end her opportunity. Originally, I believe they wanted to kill her nomination in committee with the hopes that she would never get to the floor. I don't think that's likely to happen. Mark, what do you think? Do you think she makes it?
I do believe that she makes it. And I go back to President Trump's mandate on November 5th. He made no secret about the type of people that he wanted to serve in his cabinet and on his team. And this is just yet another example. And a vote against Tulsi Gabbard by any Republican is a vote against the MAGA agenda, is a vote against the American people, hardworking, everyday Americans who want to make this country great again, want to make this country safe again and healthy, and Americans that want to restore honor, integrity back into the uh, uh, highest levels in Washington. That includes our intelligence agencies. But Roger, I find this so ironic that the Democratic Party that loves to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and empowering women's rights, that they're viciously and brutally attacking a female war veteran who used to be a Democrat. It is really remarkable to me that this two-faced party talks about women's rights and empowering women, but they want to use lies and false information and smear her reputation and her name and do everything that they can to block her confirmation. It really is just a remarkable turn of events.
Shortly after Gabbard visited Syria, uh, and she introduced legislation that would ban U.S. weapons or assistance to the Islamic State, Al Qaeda, I want to pronounce this right, Jabhat Fatah al Sham, which is another name for the Al Qaeda franchise in Syria. Uh, she sponsored this legislation. I noticed that a recent foreign policy article argued that Gabbard's bill proposing to do this was unnecessary because these groups were already designated by terrorists in the U.S. by the U.S. government, despite the fact that we have just financed exactly these groups to topple the government in Syria. This idea that taking Syria as well as weaponizing Iran serves for a more stable region. This is the foreign policy of Barack Obama, absolutely non-credible. I'm amazed again that the Senate seems to have lost their responsibility regarding advise and consent. In other words, they're supposed to be voting on cabinet officers solely on the basis of their qualifications, not on their political philosophy. So I really think one of the major reasons why Gabbard, who is, in my view, a superstar, the greatest communicative skills that I've seen in American politics since Ronald Reagan, they fear her as not only someone who would be at the nexus of our intelligence agencies and able to see all of their lies and misdeeds, but I also think they want to derail her future leadership. I was on the phone with President Donald Trump the other night, and I told him confidently that, well, I thought Tulsi Gabbard would be our first woman president. That was meant for you, Hillary Clinton. It's amazing that they question the patriotism, the loyalty of someone who was a combat veteran in Iraq and Kuwait, someone who has the security clearances required to be a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. And then when you look at the Kennedy situation, it's abundantly clear that Big Pharma is putting their thumb on the scale, and they have very, very deep resources and capability. I don't know how Bobby Kennedy kept his calm. My Sicilian Italian temper, I would have popped Ron Wyden right in the nose, but I know that's uncalled for, but it did make my blood boil. I thought RFK in his hearings was nothing short of brilliant. Mark, did you watch any of that?
I did watch it. And Roger, I didn't realize. I think it's actually unfair that he's got to go through two hearings when everybody else just really has to go through one. The Senate Finance Committee hearing on Wednesday, and then the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee on Thursday. I mean, that's brutal. The fact that he handled that with such grace, I think, is just remarkable. But I agree. I think he's going to get the Senate confirmation. It's not certainly easy, but he will. And how can you go against saving the lives of our children, saving the lives of our family members? I mean, Roger, you've experienced this at a very personal level with your wife Nydia's very serious cancer diagnosis, and her life has been saved because of various alternative treatments that you were able to seek. And so the answer is this: pharma is always wanting everybody to remain sick. Staying healthy, as you know, Roger, staying healthy and keeping Americans healthy is not a very profitable business. And I think this is finally being exposed to everyday Americans that hadn't necessarily thought about it in this way. When you begin to see and connect the dots, the people that are opposing our Robert Kennedy's confirmation are the very people that are accepting millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions from big pharma. The people that are opposing Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation are the very people that have been protecting for decades the corrupt and dysfunctional intelligence agencies that have been used to not to go after our enemies, but to go after our own people and to target political enemies instead of the real enemies. And so I think people are finally waking up, and I think that the confirmation of both Gabbard, Kennedy, and Kash Patel are all but certain.
That's the other one I really want to touch on. If you caught any of the interplay between Congressman Adam Schiff, also known as Pencil Neck or Watermelon Head, and Patel, I would say that Adam Schiff was badly overmatched. Patel's performance, I thought, was near letter perfect. Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel are the Trump nominees that they fear the most. If they appoint Robert Kennedy, he stands in the way of huge profits for the drug companies. Still shocking to me, Mark, that Anthony Fauci, as a federal official, and his wife, who's, I believe, at FDA, are allowed to own stock in and make millions of dollars from these vaccinations that they're pushing on the American people. They try to mandate, but as a minimum, they certainly sell. So if you work in a hospital, you work in a school, you want to get on a plane, well, you can't do any of those things unless you get a vaccination. If you want to travel, you can't get it. But it's not mandated. It just is mandated. There should be a conflict of interest law that says that Fauci and his wife should not be able to make millions. It really does boggle the mind. Again, Mark, your thoughts.
You're absolutely right. And I think their combined income and benefits per year was over $1.1 million on top of $900,000 in appearances and book fees. And so he's lived a lap of luxury, Anthony Fauci, while at the same time, Americans were forced to pay the tab of over $15 million in private security or in U.S. government security detail to protect Fauci as he goes on his book tour, goes grocery shopping, takes his wife on vacations, all on the taxpayer expense, while at the same time he's covering up intelligence reports. He's making decisions not based on science, but what the Fauci scientific model, which is not backed up by science. It really is remarkable. But Roger, it was really fun to see Adam Schiff, and as you always say, if it's Schiff, flush it, to be humiliated yesterday during the congressional hearings. He's not used to people punching back the way that Kash Patel did. And one telling is when he tried to force Kash Patel to look behind him, look behind you, look at these people in their eyes. And Kash doesn't even bat an eye, and he says, no, because you're talking to me, I'm looking at you. I mean, he's not used to being spoken to like this and being challenged. But what's interesting, Roger, is he talks about, this is the guy that's got a presidential pardon, and now he talks about he's done nothing wrong. Well, if you've done nothing wrong, why are you given a preemptive presidential pardon? I think the more Schiff talks, the more I think he's getting himself sideways.
It's interesting. People may not realize this, but when you are given a presidential pardon, which I am the recipient of, you have to accept the pardon. Now, candidly, I accepted it not because I was guilty, but I knew realistically while I could win my case on appeals, the judge had made so many unconstitutional pretrial rulings, and I could also prove corruption by the prosecutors, that I would be in jail for 2 years, unable to raise the money to pay for the lawyers to reach that appeal. So to me, the choice was a life and death choice. I mean, this was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I have a lifetime history of asthma. I honestly didn't want to accept the pardon, but it was the only way I could save my own life. So I signed for it. Now, people can say, well, there's proof that Stone was guilty. Tell me what the crime is I was guilty of. Lying about the Russian collusion that never took place, lying about collaborations with WikiLeaks that they have no evidence or proof of whatsoever. It's amazing to me that all these preemptive pardons. This is really easy, Adam. If you're not guilty of things, don't accept the pardon. I guarantee you, he signed that pardon.
I think you're absolutely right. He did sign that pardon, and he doesn't want to talk about that because he knows what he's been doing is wrong. But I just popped some popcorn and watched these hearings yesterday because I knew that it was going to be fireworks, and it didn't disappoint. But what Schiff and Wyden and Pocahontas and Bernie Sanders all proved is really how out of touch and really how off the beaten path these Democrats really are. And it's not about helping to make our country better again, make our country great again. It's about trying to score political points and spew nothing but lies and deceive everyday Americans. I like to say, Roger, the great cover-up of the Democratic Party, it continues.
The other big thing in the news that we want to touch, of course, is the release of the JFK assassination documents. As you know, I wrote a book in 2013, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, in which I claimed that at least one of the shooters was a man named Malcolm Mac Wallace, shooting from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. Then this new audio surface, which came from his the great grandson of Billy Sol Estes, an LBJ crony who later went to jail for corruption. So this video, which we're going to show you the audio, here's a video adapted to it, absolutely proves the thesis of my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Let's roll it.
Sure, good to see you. How's life treating you today? Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far, and I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he'd ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did. Well, you know, Lyndon could have really hit me if he would. Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been. Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I played after he got killed, because, 17 got killed in this situation very mysteriously. And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money, and hurt my family a whole lot. And it's really got me just disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry.
So to me, this is sweet exoneration, or say vindication, as I say in my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. The basic thesis is that Malcolm Mac Brown was at least one of the shooters, but he was the shooter from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. I told Alex Jones yesterday and the day before, his fingerprints, that is Wallace's fingerprints, are found on the window casing and also on the cardboard boxes that formed the crow's nest from which the shooter, Malcolm Wallace, actually shot. It's interesting that no less than 6 witnesses described seeing a man on the 6th floor in that window, and he is wearing spectacles. They all say that, receding hairline, a tan jacket, and light colored slacks. So the man in the window is clearly not Lee Harvey Oswald, who's slight, 125 pounds, I believe, and wearing a white T-shirt. Now, also interesting is there was an Indian, a Native American, whose name was Factor, who had been recruited by Wallace as a backup shooter, meaning if Wallace had the shakes or didn't have the nerve to take the shot, he had recruited Factor at a county fair years before, was so impressed with his shooting skills, he got his contact number, said, I may have work for you. Now, Factor has come forward to produce his own book. And in the book, he perfectly describes the layout of the room from which the 6th floor shots were shot, including a flat saw, which he says is just to the right of the window, because that is where construction had been going on on the Texas School Book Depository building. So I think we have just now nailed the major component of my thesis that LBJ, who was facing a crisis of his own, he was being investigated in the Bobby Baker investigation. Bobby Baker was the Secretary of the Senate. He's basically Johnson's bagman, and the Billy Sol Estes investigation. Billy Sol Estes is the flamboyant Texas wheeler dealer who's getting these multi-million-dollar agriculture contracts and kicking back to Johnson. So the 2 men in that tape are Cliff Carter, who is the executive director of the Democrat National Committee under LBJ, his top political operative, and the other one is Billy Sol Estes himself. After Sol Estes got out of prison, he maintained his silence, but once Johnson was dead, and therefore he knew it was safer because Johnson, in his view, killed as many as 18 men before he killed John Kennedy. If you listen to that entire tape, and we didn't have time to roll all of it today, Billy Sol Estes makes reference to Henry Marshall, in essence saying, Lyndon made me lie and cover up the Henry Marshall thing. If I didn't have proof of it, I'd probably already be dead myself. On the way, Henry Marshall was a Texas Ranger, a gas station attendant about 2 miles from Henry Marshall's ranch, said that a man who meets the physical description of Malcolm Mac Wallace stopped to buy gasoline and asked for directions to Henry Marshall's ranch. So this is an important part of history, this audio. It fills in the whole Johnson narrative. Now, Mark, as you know, the president has said that that he's going to declassify all of the Kennedy assassination records. This, I think, will bring the next piece of the puzzle into view and conclusion. There's already very substantial evidence released in the documents in 2017 by President Trump of the CIA's involvement. But I think, given the fact that the last time these documents were scheduled for release, it was CIA Director Mike Pompeo who objected and convinced Trump to hold back 20% of the material. To me, that means that the 20% held back is most damning to the agency. So here, I don't expect the FBI documents to prove the involvement, indeed the leadership of LBJ of this plot. I argue we've already done that. Madeline Brown, who was Johnson's mistress, who bore him a son, who was the spit and image of Lyndon Johnson, uh, said in numerous interviews that the night before the assassination, she stayed with Johnson. They slept together. And that morning, he squeezed her hand and said, upon leaving the hotel, after today, I won't have to deal with those Irish anymore, a reference to the Kennedys. So I think the Johnson part is now absolutely, I think, proven. My critics have tried to say that I claim that only Lyndon Johnson was behind this, which is not what I'm saying at all. I think we're now in these new documents about to nail the CIA involvement. It's also important to note that as the Senate Majority Leader, Johnson takes the unusual step of appointing himself to a subcommittee of the Defense Appropriations Committee. That's because this is where the CIA's secret black box documents are stored. And therefore, this is a proof that Johnson has essentially been the paymaster for the Central Intelligence Agency. He has a unique relationship with them. Big Texas Oil, it goes without saying, he carried their water in the U.S. Senate. He carried their water in the Kennedy Johnson administration. They don't want to wipe out the oil depletion allowance, which JFK is threatening to do. So they fund the assassination. D.H. Byrd owns the Texas School Book Depository building. Who is D.H. Byrd? He is Lyndon Johnson's largest contributor and fundraiser. And he's so tickled by the death of Kennedy, Mark, he has the easement, the frame of the window from which the shots were fired, the window encasement, removed, and he puts it in his living room as a trophy. This tape, by the way, that we just played for you, came from Billy Saul Estes's, I guess, great grandson, who it was handed down to him. So Johnson's role confirmed. The Central Intelligence Agency's role will soon be confirmed. And then there's organized crime. Now, this has been documented in multiple books, but the very best one by Chicago boss and overlord Sam Giancana. His daughter wrote a book, and the government admits that they had his jail cell bugged. And Giancana was talking about the impending murder of Kennedy, both before and after the murder. So again, LBJ, the CIA, Big Texas Oil, and now the mob. I hate to use the word conspiracy, so I always just call it a plot. But I think that the CIA is deathly afraid that now you're going to have absolute, indisputable proof of their involvement. Robert Kennedy's assassination has never been adequately explained. We know that Sirhan, who was a Palestinian, and the man convicted of shooting and killing Kennedy, actually got off 8 shots. All 8 shots are accounted for. None of them hit Senator Kennedy, but Thomas Noguchi, who was the coroner of LA County, very famous, in his autopsy says that Robert Kennedy died from 2 bullet shot wounds to the right left of his skull, meaning the gun barrel had been right up against his neck. That means that Eugene Cesar, missing the entire name, but Eugene Cesar Thane, Thane Cesar, anyway, this Filipino security guard was the actual shooter. He was hired just before Kennedy went to the LA Ambassador Hotel, and he quits his job and leaves immediately for the Philippines. Once again, impossible for Sirhan to be the shooter.
What's interesting, Roger, in all of this is what the release of these new Kennedy assassination files will further implode the intelligence agencies and prove yet again of the lies and deception and cover up of at the highest levels of the United States government. And I think Americans are more aware of this now because of the gigantic cover up of Joe Biden's cognitive decline over the last 4 years. And so this is yet again, and Roger, I know you took a leading role in this and ensuring that Mike Pompeo did not get a job in this new Trump administration because he was certainly not MAGA. He was working with the establishment, and the fact that he was opposed to the release of this information, of these files, because it would look poorly upon the Central Intelligence Agency, where he once admitted that as CIA director, you kind of lie, cheat, and steal. I believe he's on record talking about that. So why would he want this information released? And so, Roger, yet again, kudos to you for being able to raise awareness and help contribute to the fact that Mike Pompeo will not be serving in this administration. But this documentation is going to be fascinating. I can't wait to look at it. And Roger, I think this is going to create the plot for another Roger Stone book in your future.
Well, I spoke to the president about this very subject the other night, and I told him that I thought he should release all of the classified documents pertaining to the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. Now, fortunately, thank God, Reagan was not killed, but people don't realize how close to death he came. Once again, real flaws in the government's narrative. John Hinckley Jr. Is always in front of Reagan. He shoots from a crouching position, meaning the upward trajectory of the bullets. He gets off 4 shots. All 4 are accounted for. None of them hit Reagan. Reagan was hit from behind and above, and we don't know by whom, although Judy Woodruff, then I think of NBC, reports that there was a man on a balcony just above the entrance at the Hilton Hotel, who she said was brandishing a gun. You can go look for that on YouTube. It's not there anymore, but I did save a copy of it. And therefore, when they get Reagan to George Washington Hospital, and strangely enough, even though Press Secretary Jim Brady, who was also wounded, shot in the head, survived, and President Reagan's limousine, those 2 cars leave at the same time, but somehow Brady gets to George Washington University 15 minutes before Reagan. Where is Reagan in that 15 minutes? It's one of the things I'm going to focus on. When he does get to George Washington University, the doctors give him an immediate x-ray, and they cannot detect a bullet. They don't have a bullet. They're about to sew him back up, which would have killed him, when one of the doctors decides to do a manual examination. He puts on a rubber glove, he opens the wound, he begins to feel around, and he comes up with a projectile called a flechette. Now, a flechette is like a disc that is shot from a weapon that was exposed in the church hearings in the late 70s, that was designed very specifically for assassinations. So again, I think I really hope that President Trump will broaden his order, declassify the documents into the Reagan attempted assassination, and frankly, he should also declassify all the documents regarding the 2 attempts on his life, the one in West Palm Beach, as well as the one in Butler, Pennsylvania. I made that suggestion. The president said he would think about it. You know, Mark, generally speaking, I don't disclose my conversations with the president, but in this case, it is something he said publicly elsewhere, and therefore I really hope he will follow through on that. All right, we're just about out of time. We had some audio problems today. I apologize for that, but you can catch us here every day at 8 p.m. Eastern by going to rumble.com/Roger Stone, rumble.com/Roger Stone. Click on the follow button there you see in the right-hand corner, and you will never miss a show. Mark, tell folks where they can read your extraordinary writing for the Illinois Review.
Please visit IllinoisReview.com, ILLINOIS review.com for our website. Follow us on X and on Twitter for the latest breaking news, the largest conservative pro-Trump publication in Illinois and the Midwest.
All right, we have to leave it there. On behalf of, let me also say, you can see our show here at worldviewtube.com every day at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern. So if you miss it there, you can go see it on Rumble. All right, I think we're out of time. I'm looking forward to these disclosures. If you want to know what they say, we're going to have, we have a team set up to analyze the data very quickly and bring it to you. So the Stone Zone will be your source for information on the JFK assassination document release. My thanks to my co-host, Mark Vargas of the Illinois Review. And until Monday, God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?